And now I'm excited to introduce our final micro presenter to get us started here today, and that is the Reverend Dr. Timothy Adkins-Jones. Dr. Adkins-Jones is Assistant Professor of Homiletics at Union Theological Seminary, and he's the pastor of the historic Bethany Baptist Church in Newark, New Jersey. Dr. Adkins-Jones embodies the best of the Black preacher-scholar traditions, and he has a PhD in practical theology with a homiletics concentration from Boston University. Dr. Adkins-Jones, thanks for being here with us today, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Avery and Madeline and everyone else that is gathered. So good to see some familiar faces and looking forward to just being in fellowship with everyone. Mike, I don't know what you were talking about. I was so grateful for your presentation, and you kind of set me up because who can follow up red light, green light? I mean, who doesn't want to play more red light, green light? So I thought we were going to be friends, so I'm a little upset. But it's okay. It's okay. I'll get over it. The other thing I'll have to do is if you see me looking to the left, it's because I have set myself a stopwatch because our wonderful co-hosts have asked a Black Baptist preacher to offer a workshop, mini presentation in 10 minutes. And even though I ask my students to preach in 10 minutes, and I am a stickler for time, but when the shoe is on the other foot, it's going to take some real discipline. So I see you, Ophelia. So let me start that. So I'm tasked with speaking a little bit about the history, if you will, or maybe I've thought of it as some exemplars of political preaching. But before I speak about any particular folk, because I'll be kind of running through them and pointing you towards some examples that you can then look up, I did want to take a couple of minutes to talk about how and when political preaching takes place. We just finished hearing about when politicians come into and the rules around it. But I want us to think just a moment about what political preaching can look like for us, especially in non-ecclesial spaces. Some of us have very traditional definitions for preaching, and I absolutely understand it, that it has to essentially take place with the congregation, that there is word and some combination of sacrament and the Bible, et cetera. But I'd offer that there is a lot of political preaching, if we have a more umbrella term for preaching, that takes place in other spaces and that gives us the opportunity as preachers to preach in other spaces. One such example is testifying at community events. That not necessarily just around electoral season, but when there are community forums and folk are asked to come and to offer their word, this is an amazing time for those in the preaching vocation to show up and not to take a text, but to preach, to share testimony about an issue. It both demonstrates that the churches we represent care about the community and care about this particular concern, but it also gives us an opportunity to voice and to use the gifts that we have. Secondly, I would name when we get the opportunity to offer invocations at government gatherings. So many of our state houses, certainly on a national level, still have prayers before they meet, and they often invite local clergy to come and to pray. And my encouragement is to take advantage of that opportunity to, yes, offer a nice, wonderful prayer that would encourage people in the work, but also get a word in those prayers to speak to something that's going on. And if you know what is on the docket for that body, to speak to that issue as well, even in your prayer, to kind of lay the groundwork. Thirdly, I'd say that when we, in our own houses of worship, we have the opportunity, and absolutely following the instructions that Mike just offered for us, but we have the opportunity to create spaces for dialogue, to offer forums, community forums in and around issues, and also to provide a kind of theological think tank for issues. This is something that we can offer that a different community space can't offer. So, for example, in Newark, a few years ago, we were wrestling with in New Jersey about marijuana legalization. And so as part of a series of events, we were able to host a series of preachers to come and to not preach about it, but to talk about it and to create that kind of space. And within those testimonies, there was a lot of good theological thinking in and around these issues that helped not just members of the congregation, but members of the community more broadly think about an issue like that that has theological implications that are sometimes beneath the surface. And so there's a lot of good preaching that can take place in and around community issues, not just in the pulpit or even within the church, but outside of that. But since we're talking about preaching, and since we're talking about a kind of history of political preachers, the Baptist in me must start in the Bible, for there are a plethora of real political preachers and political preaching that happens within the text itself. Some are quite obvious. Moses, as he engaged with Pharaoh, so many of the prophets, particularly the 8th century prophets that we often celebrate and stick with. My favorite Sunday school story, Daniel, or actually those 3 Hebrew boys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when they say that they're not going to bow and they would rather go into the fiery furnace, but if not, they'll be saved, but if not, they're still not going to do it. That is political preaching. They are speaking truth to the powers that exist. And it ultimately has an effect, well, because they were met in the fire by one that they call the Son of Man. But I'm not going to preach. I'm not going to preach. My wife would disown me as a Mariologist herself if I didn't lift up Mary's Magnificat as incredible political preaching. Jesus was political preaching all over the place. His first sermon in Luke 4, the Lord's Prayer is a political sermon. His triumphal entry is a kind of embodiment of a political sermon. Paul in Acts 17 to the unknown God, and this book of Revelations, which is so often taken and used as this kind of faux code for the end of the world, when it really is a book-long political message, apocalyptic text about how Rome will come tumbling down. So the text itself is full of political preaching. And then in our history, particularly here in America, there's such a grand history of preachers being involved in the political process itself, but also in preaching politically. I see Ophelia here. So, and I don't know if we have any other Amherst alums in the house, but I want to begin by naming Henry Ward Beecher, renowned clergyman and author, anti-slavery activist, who also is an Amherst alum. Amherst at that time, back in those days, actually was a school that was intended to be for a training for ministers. So, you know, it changed a little bit over the years, but at least back in the day, it was for training of ministers. And Beecher preached a love ethic. He said, if this love of God will not move you, the fear of God will not. And so that's the way that Beecher approached his anti-slavery preaching. Interestingly, his preaching also, he tried to raise money for the Civil War efforts. And I won't tell you, but I'll allow you to Google what Beecher's Bibles were and how the money that was raised from his speeches went towards those purchases. I also have to lift up relatively in that era, Sojourner Truth, who was born as Isabella, became a Sojourner, and who began by preaching essentially her testimony. Over the years, developed a stronger and stronger political voice as she was doing intersectionality before it was popular, as she was preaching and speaking both about the oppression she faced as a Black woman, but also as a woman, and actually found herself, you can find some of these speeches, moving away from some of the other suffragists in her time, because she wasn't going to support voting unless it was not just for Black men, but also for women, right? For Black women and for all women. And also another exemplar I love to pick up, there is a rich and grand tradition of preachers in political position themselves. And so there's an interesting history about the ways that as politicians, preachers preach. But you may know, if we're going to play another a trivia game, you may know the name Hiram Revels, who was the first Black senator. But what is often not known about Hiram Revels is that he actually was a preacher. He was a Methodist preacher as he became the first Black senator during Reconstruction. And what we see with Revels and other ministers become politicians is the gifting that is produced in preaching transforms into a political speech. And so you get these beautiful, beautiful speeches that are really sermon in political cover, even on the floor of the Senate. And so I'll share some links to some of Hiram Revels' work. I don't have time to get into it, but I'm telling you, he was preaching on the Senate floor. We think about pastors come politicians like Adam Clayton Powell Jr. of Abyssinian in New York. Certainly, we think of Dr. King and civil rights movement. I can't get into King in 30 seconds, but I would point to a bit of political preaching that King did that is not often lifted up. And that is the eulogy that he gave for 3 of the 4 little girls. Again, I'm throwing things. I want you to pick it up and go Google it and research it when you get home. But if you look at the eulogy that he performed for, again, it was only 3 of the 4 little girls that were killed in the Birmingham bombing. I thought it was a beautiful piece of preaching. It was a eulogy, but it was also political, but it was pastoral at the same time. I have to lift up the person that he got I Have a Dream from, Reverend Dr. Prathia Hall, who coined the notion of a freedom faith. Really not until 1997, but it was something that was evident in her preaching throughout. And so there has been an explosion of research on Reverend Dr. Prathia Hall in the last, I'd say the last 7, 8 years or so. And so there's some incredible books that you can find about her and actually collections of her sermons that offer a wonderful example. I'll give some great examples of political preaching as well. If we're going to move a little bit forward in time, actually a lot of bit forward in time, I want to lift up an example of the pastoral and the political merging together. You may remember the tragic killing of Trayvon Martin some years ago. And when he died, there was a response within a section of the church of this thing that was called then Hoodie Sunday, in which pastors all across the country came into the pulpit with hoodies on, Skittles, and an iced tea. If you remember when Trayvon was killed, he had iced tea and Skittles with him and was wearing a hoodie. And it opened, I think, a kind of new age of political preaching, particularly in Black church spaces, where these events happen and there's a kind of event response collectively and organized across different countries. So you can find, again, if you get your Googles on, you can find all kinds of Hoodie Sunday sermons. One of my favorites is from Reverend Dr. Howard John Wesley at Alfred Street Baptist Church in Alexandria, Virginia. I preached a sermon called the RISPA Response. And it was political, but it was also pastoral in that it spoke to the heart of the issues that folk in the congregation were feeling. There's so many more, so many other things I'd want to name, but my stopwatch is telling me that I'm already over my time. But I will put my information in the chat. Feel free to get in touch however you'd like. And I can put some notes together with some other links to exemplars and people. But there's such a rich tradition to draw from in political preaching. You are not by yourself. And there are lots of people we can lean on in this moment. And in the words of one preacher turned politician in this season, keep hope alive.